Good morning, everyone. Welcome to FPC Radio Live. It is March 1st. Brand new month. Brand new league year in the NFL coming up. And, of course, the NHL trade deadline. Don't let yesterday fool you. It's actually this month, not yesterday. It was pretty wild. Not going to lie, John. I love watching the NHL trade deadline. I think it doesn't get the coverage, obviously, that, other leagues do and everything like that. But as of late, the last several years, it feels like it's been a very eventful night. And quite frankly, the East, John, dominated this trade deadline. And it looks like it's going to be an absolute bloodbath to determine who's going to represent that conference in the Stanley Cup final. However, the Bruins are still the best team, having won 8 in a row. So I don't know how close you paid attention to everything yesterday, but obviously one of the biggest moves of the day saw the Chicago Blackhawks trade 3-time Stanley Cup champion Patrick Kane, one of the faces of their franchise, one of the best Blackhawks in Blackhawk history, to the New York Rangers. And, this is something that obviously was anticipated, not specifically to the Rangers, but Patrick Kane's name has been mentioned for quite some time as a potential trade candidate, a guy that obviously the Chicago Blackhawks are not what they were 10 years ago, what they were 10 years ago was borderline dynastic. They are not that right now, and we're seeing that with the offloading of several players, obviously the biggest name being Patrick Kane. But like I said, John, this is shaping up to be one hell of a playoff season, especially in the East, because, top to bottom, you have a lot of really, really good teams.
The 6 best records in hockey reside in the Eastern Conference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at potential first-round matchups of Tampa, Toronto, and in the Metropolitan, the Rangers and the Devils. So
yeah.
2 of those teams are going to get knocked out in the first round, and those are 2 teams, whichever they are, which would be leading the Western Conference right now. That's how deep the Eastern Conference is. And then you've got, of course, the Bruins just lapping the field, and then Carolina with a fairly comfortable lead in the Metropolitan. So, yeah, the Eastern Conference playoffs are going to be insane. So the Bruins get by the first round, whether they play whoever, the Islanders or the Penguins, whoever it may be. Their next matchup would be either Tampa or Toronto, and those 2 teams are loading up. My big question about Patrick Kane is, can he still play? Can he still contribute? He's a huge name. He's a future Hall of Famer. He's a great player, one of the greatest Blackhawks of all time. But can he still play?
Yeah, and look, that's the question. And obviously for a team like the Rangers, who are really good, they have arguably Look, Linus Ullmark's going to win the Vezina, assuming nothing dramatic happens over the course of the next 20 games. But Igor Shesterkin, that's the one guy right now. You want to throw in Andrei Vasilevsky's name in there for historical sake. Absolutely. I'm not going to argue with you on that. But he's a guy who can make a difference in a playoff series. Now, my question is, and this is the big issue for all these teams not named the Bruins. Now they all got better, I thought, but can you, specifically the Rangers, because I do think Patrick Kane can still play, and certainly I think his impact can be made more so on a team like the Rangers, who are pretty deep and obviously are a very good team, unlike the Blackhawks. The problem is, though, for these teams, who can compete and beat the Boston Bruins right now in a 7-game series? That's the biggest thing. Can they go in and win a game in Boston? Absolutely. Can one of these goalies come in and steal a game, maybe 2? Absolutely. But I still am finding it very, very hard to imagine the Boston Bruins in any situation against any team right now losing 4 out of 7 games. Because, John, I don't have to really double check my math here. I don't even think they've lost 3 out of 7 games at any point this season. So, did we lose John? Maybe we lost.
No. I'm still here. No, I the whole part of that is they've got 8 regulation losses and 5 overtime losses. So they've only lost 13 games the entire season, which is just incredible. Like I said the other day, Carolina's having a fantastic season, and the Bruins are, comfortably ahead of them for the best record in hockey. Sure. we see all of that. I mean, if you look at the Eastern Conference, is there one team that you look at and say that's the toughest matchup for the Bruins, whether it be within the division or in the Metropolitan Division? I mean, I'm not an in-depth hockey guy like you are, but it would seem to be Carolina. They beat them last year in 7 games. They play a real heavy style of game. So I would think that they probably have the best shot of giving the Bruins trouble in a series.
Yeah, no, I would agree. Although I really like the teams in the let's see, the greater New York area, both the Devils and the Rangers. I think it's going to be interesting to see how each of their new players fit in. Obviously, Patrick Kane with the Rangers, Timo Meyer with the Devils, and those two players can obviously make a huge impact for both of them. But to your point, I am, and again, this is partly because of the history that they've had, and kind of the play style that Carolina has. But for the first time in, I can't maybe since 2011, honestly. I feel really good about the Bruins' physical game matching up against a team like Carolina, whereas in the past, teams like Carolina and Tampa specifically, because you could like for stretches, the Bruins were able to match or at least come close to Tampa's offensive ability. The Bruins have always been a pretty good offensive team, albeit very top heavy at times. Now they're very deep. They can win finesse, but they can also win physical, and that's the biggest thing I think for this Bruins team when it comes to going up against a team like Carolina or going up against a team like Tampa. Carolina, likely they wouldn't obviously see until the conference final. But Tampa, like you said, you can see them in the second round. You can see a team like Toronto. And look, we'll sit here and make our jokes, and there's not a chance in the world I'd ever pick Toronto to win a playoff series over Boston right now. But that doesn't mean that they're not going to give you a pretty tough matchup. Now, I'm confident the Bruins are going to overcome that one, but at the same time, that's not going to be a walk in the park. So, look, if the Bruins end up doing what we kind of talked about the other day, where it's like they could potentially go on like one of these 16-5 playoff runs, it's going to be that much more impressive considering the field that they're going up against.
Yeah, I mean, the closest we saw something like that was a couple of years ago when Tampa won their first of the 2 cups, where they kind of just were better than everybody and won their series pretty handily. So there's always going to be a tough matchup in there somewhere because that's just the nature of the sport, right? So in the first round, you're playing a team that's really heavy, physical. So now you've got to be able to adapt to that. And then after you win that series, the next series could be against a team that's highly skilled. I mean, imagine, I know it's in the Western Conference, but if you go from a team that's a physical team, all of a sudden you beat that team and then you're playing Edmonton. I mean, that's going to be like culture shock, right? When you go on the ice to see Connor McDavid and those guys. So you've got to be able to adapt to that. And that's, I think, why the Bruins are clearly the favorite here, because obviously their regular season has been incredible, but they're versatile enough to win in different styles. And that's really something that maybe they've lacked over the years. I think they had it in 2011. They won the Cup, obviously. But this team seems to be able to now stand up to the bullies and also stand up to the teams that are highly skilled.
And look, that 2011 team, they had a brief taste of getting to the conference finals, but this was a team that obviously hadn't won since 1972. There was a lot of questions, and look, I mean, quite frankly, as good as that team was, this team is better. I mean, you're talking about potentially, and look, I'm not going to say greatest Bruins team ever, but you're not going to get far down the list, assuming this plays out, say the most favorable way for the Bruins. They end up winning the Stanley Cup. You're going to talk about this team as being one of the best teams in league history. Well, yeah, I mean, again, if they win, they're on pace to break the wins mark. They're on pace to still break the Canadiens mark. I mean, very tight margin, so they're really going to have to keep pace or do better, obviously, from here on out. But you're talking about historical numbers, and then again, it so much goes into winning the Cup, though. I mean, you win the Cup, historical, greatest Bruins season ever, this, that, and the other. You're talking about great NHL teams. The Bruins are going to be up there. They lose, well, that's it. They lose. Nice job. you had some fun for a few months, but the reality of it is you didn't win. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on obviously this Bruins team, but considering the makeup and how they can win in many different ways, I think they're going to be just fine. So at this point, I'm just ready for the playoffs. Let's get there. Let's just get there.
Yeah,
I want to see it.
They still got a tough schedule. I believe 5 consecutive weekends of back-to-back games, Saturday and Sunday. So those aren't easy to deal with. Hockey players aren't into load management. We know that. So, but if you can give Bergeron a day off here and there, Krejci, because, they're both veteran players, give them a little bit of time off so they're a little bit recharged for the playoffs. But you also don't want to get into being rusty, right?
Yeah.
You can see that where right now there's nothing they're playing for other than history. I mean, unless they have a total collapse, they're going to win the President's Trophy. So the one thing you want to avoid is, on April 15th or whenever the playoffs start, that all of a sudden you hadn't had a competitive game or a competitive situation for 6 weeks, and now you're down 2-1 going into the third period of game one, and you're like, oh, this is kind of strange. Although they've had that happen a lot this year, and then go out and score 4 goals in the third period and win 5-2. I mean, it really hasn't deterred them from anything. But again, when you're facing playoffs, and we know, home ice advantage in the playoffs is kind of strange. Sometimes it works against the team because you get down and the crowd gets very restless.
Yeah.
And that can sometimes, filter through the team. Look what the Bruins did in 2011, winning Game 7 in Vancouver. Once they got that 2-goal lead, you could just sense that the Vancouver crowd was ready to just, start flipping cars over and burning down the city, which is exactly what they did like 2 hours later. But yeah, so that's something you want to avoid. But the key thing here is the depth, right? Because if you got Taylor Hall and Charlie Coyle on your third line, that's darn good. That's outstanding. And we know what the production they get from the top 2 lines.
And that's the thing too. A guy like Taylor Hall, he's not even really scoring a lot. And that's the scary thing, because he's a guy that, again, he can go on a burner where he's just, the puck finds a stick and then the puck finds the net and all that. So, but he still made a huge impact on this team. Like I love his game. I think, a lot of the things that he doesn't necessarily get recognized on the stat sheet. And of course, he's going to be looked at as a guy who needs to score more and whatnot. And I think he can do that in the playoffs. But, again, the depth on this team, it's hard to match it. I mean, there's some really good teams in the East. So I think that's going to keep the competitive juices for the Bruins flowing because they do have a really nice lead, and probably one that's, very likely not going to go away. But you still don't want to rest and get too lazy. And I think fortunately for this team, that their mental makeup isn't going to allow that. I think especially the older players, guys like Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand, they've gotten close a couple times now since winning the Stanley Cup, and I don't think they like that feeling. They want to go all the way. So I think that's going to help them. And look, this stretch of back-to-backs and the competition isn't, I think it's a tough schedule, like you said, from the point of a lot of back-to-backs and tight windows for games or whatever. But I don't think the competition is necessarily the best. They have a fairly modest schedule. Like they only play a handful of really good teams. They have the Rangers coming up in a few days, which is going to be pretty big matinee. Matchup with the Lightning later in the season. I think another one with Toronto, but there's a few Montreals in there, a couple Blackhawks. So, the competition's going to be okay. But I think it could actually benefit them in the long run because if you go into the playoffs already kind of on that playoff run of playing a lot of games, not necessarily back to back, but every other day, that's going to be a good thing for this Bruins team, who I think, fortunately for them, like I said, there are a few other good teams in the East that aren't necessarily on their heels, but it basically gives let's see, it gives the Bruins an opportunity to make sure that they stay competitive, because if they kind of fall off, then again, there's going to be an opportunity for a team like Carolina to creep up there. But anyways, before we go though, John, big debut tonight in the NBA. Kevin Durant finally making his debut with the Suns. I mean, it feels like that trade happened months ago, but well, we haven't really been able to talk about it. I mean, there was an All-Star break in there. There was, the Super Bowl, all that stuff. But Kevin Durant makes his debut with the Suns tonight. And look, I'm eager to watch it. I'm not going to lie. I'm very eager to watch it because the Suns are a team that, I mean, You add Kevin Durant to that team, that can make a drastic difference.
Yeah, when we saw Kyrie get traded to Dallas 3 weeks ago, we talked about it, and it could be a disaster or it could be a complete home run, and it's been closer to being a disaster because Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving are both ball dominant. Kyrie's not necessarily the easiest guy to play with, on and off the court. Durant, to me, of all the superstars, is the most readily plug and play player in the league. I mean, he'll just go out there, he'll get his 18 to 20 shots, he'll score 30. He can catch and shoot, he can create his own shot, he'll give you good effort on the defensive end. He's a good passer. I mean, he's an all-time great player, but he fits in perfectly, and I think it'll work with Chris Paul. So you've got these two veteran players. Chris Paul would like to win a championship. He's never won one. He's been to one finals. And Durant, who I think kind of wants to prove that he can win without being on Golden State. Now, if he wins a championship this year, they'll say, well, he went to a ready-made team. But let me just say this. When Phoenix acquired him, they were essentially a 500 team. So, I think if he puts them over the top, he'll get plenty of credit for that. But this should work out. And then you also put in Devin Booker, who is an outstanding player as well, and DeAndre Ayton. So they're going to be very, very difficult to deal with in the Western Conference because I just have so much respect with Durant's game that he can just step in, and it should be seamless with Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and the rest of that team.
Yeah. Look, I'm right there with you. We watched a couple of games with Kyrie and Dallas, and you're like, well, okay, look, he's out there. No one's going to deny his skill and everything like that. But to your point, some of the things we're concerned about are kind of starting to creep in there. And again, you question maybe, how sustainable is it over the course of the rest of the season and into the playoffs? But I'm right there with you. I think Kevin Durant's a much more, honestly, and I think a lot of people, obviously he gets criticized a lot and all that, but like, he's the most like human athlete in the NBA. You know what I mean? Like he's just a guy. He's a guy who has burner accounts. He's a guy who will waste his time responding to trolls. It's kind of like me. Me and Kevin Durant are a lot the same. Like, I mean, let's.
And Aaron Rodgers, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Have,
like
burner accounts. Maybe he does.
No, I'm sure he does. There's a few. I think at John Sapp 25 is one of them. So
no, not if you read my tweets recently.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, maybe we'll dive into
guy.
Yeah, maybe we'll dive into that later this week. Examine
there's
John's
some really stinging tweets I put out earlier in the week.
That's probably why he hasn't said anything after he emerged out of darkness.
He's still in shock that his guy is criticizing him for going 22 straight games without having a 300-yard passing game during the same period of time. Brock Purdy, Bailey Zappi,
wow, really?
White. Yeah, no, he's gone 22 straight games. I'm not making this up.
Wow,
he's gone 22 straight games without cracking 300 yards passing in a single game. And during that stretch, Bailey Zappi, Mac Jones, Mike White, Zach Wilson, and Brock Purdy and Sam Darnold. And I just stopped that. That's six. Those six quarterbacks have all had 300-yard passing games. Bailey Zappi started 2 games in his career as a 300-yard passing game more recently than Aaron Rodgers had. So I didn't have this on the tweet. I probably should have. But Aaron Rodgers, who says he owns the Chicago Bears, which has been true throughout his career, is now evolving into a Chicago Bears type quarterback.
Yeah, that's look. I genuinely was not it's shocking. But I'm not like entirely shocked because again, I mean, yardage numbers. I mean, he's never been a big yardage guy, and again, some of the criticism of his play has been maybe being a little bit too protective of his personal numbers. The touchdowns and the interceptions, and that kind of maybe dissuades him from not taking some more risks or whatever. I don't know. I mean, again, there's. There's things obviously that we can split hairs when talking about Aaron Rodgers and see how that happens. We started talking about Kevin Durant, now we're in on Aaron Rodgers.
Same guy, right?
Yeah, look,
to me, a lot of and you like those guys, right? I mean, and I agree with you in that they're both pretty human, right? I mean, because they're Kevin Durant, I think, spends his day at home, on Twitter, Instagram, whatever, TikTok, and like listening to Skip and Shannon talk about him and then he reacts to it, which is kind of, I wouldn't say it's refreshing. It might be a bit odd and maybe a bit dangerous, but he seems real, right? Like he's just being a real person. But to me, that Rodgers stat of 22 consecutive games without cracking 300 yards passing, it would almost be like me coming on here and saying, oh, by the way, Kevin Durant hasn't cracked 30 points in a game for like 42 straight games, and you'd say that can't be possible, right? I mean, he's too good for that. But yeah,
just makes me angrier that that 2021 MVP, man, it's killing me.
Oh no, don't go there.
I can't. Look,
put it this way: they both deserve the MVP. Let me put it this way: I think, well, Mahomes deserved the MVP this year, although if Jalen Hurts didn't get hurt, I think he may have won it. But both guys had MVP caliber seasons. You know, it's not like sometimes you look back at some of the Major League Baseball MVPs, you know, American National League, and you go, how the hell did that guy win the MVP? Like, he didn't have really great stats, and someone in the league. I mean, Ted Williams won a Triple Crown and didn't win the MVP of the league back when the Triple Crown was even more valued than it is now because of all the new modern stats. But yeah, they were both deserving in 2021. Our two guys.
I can't. It's gonna bug me. I'm gonna be like 82 years old, like sipping my food out of a straw, and that's just gonna pop into my head, and I can't believe it. I'll be like, oh.
Randolph Hearst with Rosebud, you know, at the end of Citizen Kane.
There we go.
Yeah, Rosebud, you know, 2021 MVP, you know.
That'll be me. That's what's going to drive me insane. Actually, no, I don't know. Maybe my trip to Kansas City in a few weeks is going to drive me insane. So we'll see. Yeah. Well, it's like 2 months from now, actually. Now that I think about it, technically it's next month, but the draft is at the end of April. So there's still time to prepare and stoke the angers and the emotions of the Chiefs fans before I go out and meet them. So, but that's
wear a disguise. Yeah, that's all. Just wear a disguise. You'll be fine.
Maybe I'll wear a wolf mask for anyone who follows the drama of one Chiefs fan in particular. I can disguise myself as him. So, all right, that's going to do it for us here today. We will be back tomorrow. Probably definitely talking more NHL trade deadline. Maybe we'll react to Kevin Durant's big game. What do you think? Stat line? I'm going to say, let's say 32, 8, and 5. Going to have a big day. Big night tonight. How about that? What do you give me if I'm right?
Good to me. I'll give you a compliment.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very valued.
And a wolf mask.
Oh, okay, good. I'm kind of wondering why you have one, but all right, that's going to do it for us here today. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will talk to you tomorrow.